In the hidden room, Rita scanned her surroundings. There has to be something useful here. I can't leave empty-handed. Her eyes landed on an unusual flower vase. Flowers? She found it odd. Nobles were meticulous about their decorations, yet this dried-up flower sat untouched in Jean's bedroom. It must mean something, she thought, plucking it out quickly. Outside, the shouts grew louder. "Stop the Baron!" Men yelled as they struggled to restrain Jacquard, who continued beating John mercilessly. Blood splattered as they struck him with sticks in an attempt to stop him. Time to step in before someone notices my absence, Rita thought, tucking the flower into her purse. She dampened her handkerchief with tea and rubbed her eyes, making it appear as though she had been crying. John lay motionless, his body battered. At last, someone managed to hold Jacquard back. "Stop, Jacquard!" Rita cried out, making him freeze. "You don't have to do this. Not for me." She stepped forward, her voice trembling as she placed a hand on his chest. His bloodied hands shook, and at her plea, his clenched fists slowly loosened. "Quick! Tie him up!" someone ordered. Within moments, Jacquard was forced to the ground, his wrists bound. He lay there silently, his gaze fixed on Rita, who wept before him. Later, Rita stared at her reflection. "Almost all the bruises have healed. I finally have a healthy body, yet I need anything but that right now." She recalled the investigator who had taken her statement. "I couldn't even bribe him. Of course, they're all Prince Brant's men." "Miss, please hurry. You must be at court today," Jana said, rushing in. "Are my mourning clothes ready?" Rita asked. "Yes, miss," Jana confirmed, hesitating. Her expression darkened. "I still can't believe it. Sir Jean is really—" Rita feigned sorrow, though inside she smirked. "That makes two of us," she replied curtly before moving to her bed, where 3 dresses were laid out. She pointed at one. "This one. And for my makeup. Bring out the bruises again." "Yes, miss?" "You haven't heard anything from my parents, have you?" Rita asked. "No, miss. Nothing since the last letter. Not only did their daughter's fiancé die, but she's also set to testify in court, yet no word from them?" Rita frowned. "Something's off." "Ah, miss! I almost forgot. I dried and preserved the cutting you gave me, just as you instructed," Jana said. "Good. Well done, Jana." Rita nodded. "For now, I'll handle the trial. Then I'll figure out what that strange plant is." The courtroom was packed, nobles filling every seat. Rita sat calmly in the defendant's section, her bruises hidden under makeup. "Oh, my stars, Ver, how did this even happen?" Julie gasped, rushing over. "Losing your fiancé, so terrible! Not getting into the Royal Guard can't even compare." She grabbed Rita's hand. "Stay strong, Ver. That's what I did." Rita held back a scoff. "Even now, she finds a way to brag? Julia, I still need time to grieve," Rita whispered tearfully. "I can't help but despair every time I think of him." Julie blinked in shock. "She's acting like I just rubbed salt in her wounds." "You mustn't give up, Ver. Even in death, I'm sure, Jean." "How can you say his name so carelessly?" Rita cut in, sobbing. "Just thinking about him breaks me." Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Julie hesitated, confused. "But, Ver—" "Oh, dear," a voice interrupted smoothly. "It seems my sister is bothering you, Lady Verta." Blaine Shade smiled as he approached, bowing slightly. Julie fell silent, tense. "Julia, give the lady space to mourn her fiancé," Blaine said, gently leading his sister away. "I was only trying to comfort her," Julie mumbled. Blaine glanced at Rita out of the corner of his eye. "I knew she wasn't ordinary." Rita met his gaze. "But I never imagined she'd be capable of killing her own fiancé." The courtroom filled with murmurs as more people arrived. "Did you see that bruise on her cheek?" "They say her fiancé hit her," a woman whispered with a smirk. "How bold," a man responded. "I suppose Count Alberhart is overseas?" "I heard Jean Lawrence even had the audacity to ask what the fuss was about before he died." Someone added, "Would his own bodyguard have beaten him to death if he hadn't deserved it?" Another voice questioned. "Even if the Alberharts aren't highly influential in noble circles, this is a major scandal between the families of counts," someone murmured. Rita sat quietly, listening. Then, the room suddenly hushed. A figure stepped inside, drawing every eye toward him. "Oh my! It's Marquise Carter," a woman whispered. A chill ran down Rita's spine. "Carter's here?" Her gaze shifted toward him. "He must have come after hearing about the death of one of his men." Her jaw clenched. "He looks like he's been living well. That son of a—" She cut off her thoughts, suppressing her anger. I'll deal with you soon enough. Once everyone was seated, Rita remained composed. Prince Van Brandt entered, taking his place as the judge. Bring in the defendant, he ordered. The doors opened, and Baron Jacquard was led in, shackled. His body was covered in scars, but his expression remained unreadable as he walked past Count Lawrence. You ungrateful bastard! Count Lawrence shouted, leaping to his feet. You're no better than a beast. After I took you in, this is how you repay me? His voice shook with fury. Rita glanced at Jacquard. His wounds have healed a bit. She clenched the piece of paper in her hands. I assume he used the ointment I sent him. Before the trial date was set, Jacquard had been sitting in his cell when a parcel was tossed inside. He unfolded a note within. If you agree to my proposal, fold a corner of this note and return it. Verta Alberhart. Now in the courtroom, he briefly glanced at Rita, but she pretended not to notice. Jacquard, the accused. Age 28. Title. Baron, bodyguard of the late Jean Lawrence. Are these personal details correct? Prince Brandt asked. Jacquard Sita gave a curt nod. Yes, they are correct. Prince Brandt continued. On the 8th day of the month of Anemone, within the plaintiff's estate, the defendant is accused of assaulting and killing Jean Lawrence. The motive has been determined as romantic admiration for the victim's fiancé, as well as a personal grudge, categorizing the crime as one of passion. Do you agree with this statement? The room filled with murmurs. Jacquard leaned forward slightly, his head bowed. I acknowledge my crime. However, my motive was neither passion nor personal grudge. It was my duty as a knight to protect Lady Verta. His gaze flickered toward Rita. Rubbish! Count Lawrence roared. A bodyguard attacking his own master? You're worse than a dog. Prince Brandt slammed his gavel. Order! The defendant will give his statement. No one else may speak. Jacquard remained composed. Your Honor, until recently, Lady Verta suffered severe physical abuse at the hands of Count Lawrence's son. A hush fell over the room. As a knight who upholds the code of chivalry, I saw no other way to protect her than to overpower Jean Lawrence. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. I ask the court to consider this, Jacquard added calmly. He follows directions well, Rita thought as she observed him. Very well, Prince Brandt said. Would the witness, Verta Alberhart, please step forward? Prince Brandt watched as Rita approached, raising her right hand to take the oath. The investigators said it would take 5 weeks for her to fully heal. She's still bruised here and there, he noted. I, Verta Alberhart, solemnly swear that the evidence I give to this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, Rita said firmly. She inhaled slowly before speaking. Although it pains me to say this, I did suffer continual abuse at the hands of my fiancé, Jean Lawrence. Jacquard bowed his head in silence as Rita continued. He never cared for me. I thought that if I tried harder, he would come to love me, but no matter what I did, he continued to hit me. Her voice trembled. The crowd gasped. Oh, my word, a lady exclaimed. Look at those bruises. How awful, another whispered. He beat me at home, in my parlor, even at his place of work, the palace, Rita revealed. Objection, Count Lawrence bellowed. Where is your proof? Who's to say you didn't have someone else hit you just to frame my son? There is no definitive evidence, Prince Brandt admitted, but there is a witness to the assault. The courtroom fell silent. Count Lawrence's eyes narrowed. I demand you summon this so-called witness. My son would never have laid a hand on his fiancée. Prince Brandt raised his hand. That witness, he said, pausing briefly, is me. A collective gasp swept through the room. Brandt's mind flashed back to the day Rita visited the palace. He had seen the bruises on her face and asked her directly about them. I saw the evidence with my own eyes, he declared. I am the witness. The courtroom erupted. Count Lawrence's face twisted in disbelief. Your Honor, I beg your pardon, he stammered. Prince Van Brandt remained composed. A few days before the victim's death, I encountered Lady Verta Alberhart on the stairway of the Royal Administrative Building. She was on her way home after being assaulted by Jean Lawrence, he stated, causing a ripple of shock through the crowd. The murmurs grew louder. Prince Van Brandt isn't one to lie, someone whispered. He's one of the fairest and most honorable noblemen in the land. Prince Brandt continued, explaining that while he hadn't seen the full extent of Rita's injuries due to her long gown that day, the swelling on her cheek and the bruise on her lip had been undeniable. Rita's thoughts raced. I never imagined that an accidental encounter would work in my favor. Raising her hand, she spoke up. Your Honor, I would also like to summon a witness. The courtroom stilled. I call Lord Blaine Shade to the stand, she announced. Julie Shade's eyes widened in shock. What? She gasped, looking at her brother. Blaine rose from his seat and walked toward the witness stand, his expression calm. Lady Verta has long been a close friend of my younger sister, Julia, he began, offering a polite smile. During her visits to our home, we occasionally exchanged light conversation. Julie watched, confused by her brother's words. One day, I noticed a bruise on Lady Verta's wrist, Blaine revealed, his tone shifting. The kind of mark only force from an adult man could leave. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. At first, she tried to brush it off to protect her fiancé, but eventually she told me the truth, Blaine said, glancing at Rita. That bruise. Rita thought, recalling the moment Jacquard had grabbed her wrist. Though Jacquard caused it, Jian was ultimately to blame. Having finished his statement, Blaine stepped away from the stand, a smirk playing on his lips. And with that, my debt is repaid. Prince Brant turned to Count Lawrence. Does the plaintiff have any further objections? The Count sat stiffly, his head bowed. He clenched his fists, his face contorted in anger. No, Your Honor, he muttered. Verta Alberhart, Prince Brant said, turning back to her. You have proven your authenticity as a witness. Please continue your testimony. Rita nodded gratefully. After Jean assaulted me at the palace, I sought to nullify our engagement, but he refused to meet with me, she said, voice trembling slightly. So, I went to his estate before his usual departure for the palace, to speak with Baron Jacquard. Her gaze shifted to the shackled man sitting nearby. For the record, please state your reason for seeking out Baron Jacquard separately, Prince Brant interjected. I needed someone to support my claim of assault, Rita admitted. I believed Baron Jacquard, as a knight who upholds honor, would be willing to testify. Honor? She almost scoffed at her own words. He was nothing but a dog's dog. You dare! Count Lawrence barked from his seat. Ignoring him, Rita continued, but he refused. He said that speaking out would damage my fiancé's reputation. The tension in the room thickened. Prince Brant studied her carefully. How did a man so loyal to his master end up beating him to death with his bare fists? Please be as detailed as possible. Rita inhaled deeply. Jean found us together. The air in the courtroom grew heavy. When he saw me with Jacquard, he called me a whore and began hitting me, Rita recounted, her voice strained with emotion. The Baron tried to stop him, but John wouldn't relent. When Jacquard left to call for help, John chased after him, striking him across the face. The room was silent, captivated. Then, Jean said if the Baron left, he would throw me to other men and have them violate me, Rita whispered, her voice barely audible. Gasps filled the courtroom. He said he would pass me around like a rag doll, she choked out, trembling. Julie Shade covered her mouth in horror. Did you hear that? Someone exclaimed. For Jean Lawrence to have said such vile things. I can hardly believe it, another murmured. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, outrage spreading through the crowd. Prince Brant slammed his gavel. Order, order, he commanded, striking it again and again. The weight of Rita's words hung in the air. She turned toward Jacquard. The Baron lost all composure that day because he sought to protect me. Her voice wavered, but her resolve remained firm. Baron Jacquard is a true knight. She then turned to Prince Brant, lowering her head slightly. Please take my suffering into account and lessen his sentence. A loud crash rang through the hall as Count Lawrence shot up from his seat. Wench, he bellowed. How dare you side with that murderer? You spew such vile lies and still call yourself a lady. The royal guards moved to restrain him, but he pushed against them, trying to lunge toward Rita. You slept with that bastard, didn't you? You killed my son! He raged. Hold him back! A guard shouted as they restrained the struggling count. Unhand me! Do you know who I am? He roared, thrashing against their grip. Rita clutched her hands to her chest, eyes filled with feigned shock. Such violence, such hatred, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. You and your son are exactly the same. What? The wench has lost her mind! Count Lawrence spat, before his body suddenly collapsed. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Count Lawrence has fainted! Call for a physician! A guard shouted. Tension filled the air as Prince Brant straightened. According to our laws, the crime of killing a nobleman is punishable by death, he declared. However, Considering the defendant's actions were driven by both chivalry and the need for self-defense against Jean Lawrence's assault and intimidation, the room held its breath. I find the defendant guilty of accidental manslaughter. The verdict echoed through the hall. The Court of Osland hereby sentences Baron Jacquard to 20 years of imprisonment. The gavel struck one final time. The courtroom remained still. Outside, Prince Brant stood with his fellow judges, watching as Rita wept quietly. Her parents aren't even in the country. Poor girl. But then, she did something that made his breath hitch. As she wiped her tears, her lips curled upward. A slow, chilling smile. Prince Brant stiffened. What? She's smiling? A shiver ran down his spine. Something about that smile was terrifying. 20 years. That should be more than enough time to teach Jacquard a lesson, Rita thought with a sly grin. Tears streamed down her face, but she was unaware that Prince Brant had been watching her. As she walked away, he narrowed his eyes. I'll have to keep an eye on her, he murmured to himself. Rita's carriage rolled through the city streets, thus heading toward the Alberhart estate. Now, I just need to take care of the butler, she mused, her thoughts drifting to Ian. Suddenly, the carriage came to a halt. A firm knock sounded against the door. Milady, I apologize, but another carriage is blocking the road ahead, the coachman informed her, his voice tense. Oh, which family does it belong to? Rita inquired. The Marquise Carter, he replied. Rita's eyes widened slightly as she flinched. What does Carter want with Verta? Could he have figured out my true identity? She wondered, her mind racing. Is it possible that Yersha was caught? The coachman shifted uneasily. Shall I turn back to the courthouse and request assistance? If we involve the authorities, he might move, but that would also draw unnecessary attention. No need, Rita said firmly. If the Marquise wishes to speak with me, have him come to my carriage. She folded her arms, her expression cool and composed. At the very least, I would hope an uninvited guest wouldn't be so shameless as to make me walk to him. With that, she shut the carriage door with a sharp bang, making the coachman flinch. Moments later, Marquis Carter approached. The coachman bowed as he knocked gently on Rita's door. Lady Verta, my name is Proud Carter. May I join you in your carriage for a moment? He asked politely. Rita opened the door, offering him a warm smile. Please come in, my lord. He stepped inside and sat across from her. During the trial, I was deeply moved by your testimony, he began. I had no idea Jean was such a monster. I should have seen the signs. Ever the silver-tongued snake. No, he may be even worse now, Rita thought, unimpressed by his supposed remorse. My condolences for the violence you endured, as well as your loss, Carter said gently. Thank you for your kind words, my lord, Rita replied smoothly. Despite all his faults, he was still your fiancé, he continued. I can see your grief. Rita lowered her gaze, letting tears pool in her eyes. Of course. He used to be so sweet to me. Her voice trembled. Even now, I grieve when I think of him. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. In reality, she just wanted Carter to leave. Of course, Carter said, nodding solemnly. Your sorrow is shared by all who love Jean. Rita studied him carefully. So, he doesn't realize who I really am. He just keeps talking about Jean. Forging ahead, she feigned curiosity. I heard you were quite close to him as well, my lord. Carter let out a soft sigh. He was a competent official, so I treated him as a protégé. Who could have predicted things would turn out this way? Then his expression darkened slightly. He leaned forward. Lady Verta, on the day of the incident, did anything go missing from Jean's estate? Rita blinked innocently. Missing? I couldn't say. Carter studied her for a moment before sighing. I see. He stood up. Forgive my intrusion, my lady. He must have entrusted Jean with something important. A weakness? Rita speculated as she watched him move toward the carriage door. Carter turned back. Until next time, Lady Verta. A mischievous idea crossed Rita's mind. Since he has no idea who I really am, how about I tease him a little? Ah, perhaps you're referring to that, she said suddenly. Carter froze. That? His interest piqued. You know, in Jean's room, she continued, watching him inch closer. His expression sharpened. What did he keep in his room? You know, Rita teased, letting the suspense build. Carter's patience thinned. Would you care to elaborate in detail? Rita tilted her head slightly. So you didn't know about Jean's secret? She let out a small sigh, looking almost flustered. Carter leaned in. Go on. She clutched her hands together. Jean had a peculiar fascination with watching others. Carter's face twitched. In his room, she continued, lowering her voice, he arranged the bed and the sofa just so he could observe. Carter let out a long sigh, clearly unimpressed. Damn it! This wench is obviously clueless. It was a pleasure meeting you, Lady Verta, he said, forcing a polite smile. I wish you safe travels. Goodbye, Marquise Carter, Rita said sweetly. The moment he left, her smile vanished. So, Carter is searching for something in Jean's secret room? But what? Later, at the library, Rita searched through the international trade, customs law, and humanities sections. So many books, but not a single illustrated guide to plants? She thought in frustration. Miss, are you unable to find what you're looking for? Jana, her maid, asked. No, I'll have to go to the Royal Library tomorrow, Rita replied, hands on her waist. Yes, miss. I'll make the preparations. There's no need for you to come. I have another errand, Rita said, looking away. She was worried about Yersha. The next day, at the Royal Library, King Charlotte stood near the window, his expression troubled. Carter told me to take care not to catch a cold, he murmured. He said I wouldn't want to die of pneumonia, just like my father did. His uncle's jaw clenched. Do you really think Carter is connected to my father's death, uncle? The young king asked. There were too many unanswered questions. The maids responsible for his father's meals had disappeared. Each time His Majesty's condition worsened, physicians across the land became entangled in strange incidents, unable to help. There's no doubt this would have been impossible without inside help, King Charlotte said grimly. His uncle balled his fists. How dare he say such a thing to the king's face? A few days ago, Carter even had the audacity to propose I marry his niece, Charlotte continued, his face darkening. His uncle knelt before him, taking his hands. I will do everything in my power to unearth the truth, Your Majesty, Prince Van Brandt declared. No doubt Marquise Carter's countless misdeeds have left a trail somewhere. The young prince's gaze burned with determination. I shall work tirelessly to bring him to his knees. You have my word. At the Royal Library, Rita pored over books and journals, searching for information about the mysterious flower she had taken from Jean's room. As expected, it wasn't a common plant. I don't have much time before I have to act as a guarantor for Jacquard, she thought, flipping through the pages until something caught her eye. Mistletoe parvae somniferum, she read. Her brow furrowed. What does that mean? She quickly turned the pages, searching for details. Then she found it. Continued consumption leads to symptoms of addiction and lung damage. The symptoms mimic pneumonia. If consumption stops abruptly, the victim may die from sudden shock. Rita's eyes widened as she absorbed the information. What a terrifying plant. Even I think this is a suspicious weed. A smirk played on her lips. Could it be a drug? Just then, Prince Brandt descended the staircase leading into the Royal Library. He noticed Rita engrossed in her book. Lady Bertha? I wouldn't have taken her for the type to enjoy serious reading, he thought, stealing a glance. Rita, sensing someone's gaze, stylishly lifted her eyes, only to find Prince Brandt looking at her. The moment their eyes met, he quickly looked away, pretending not to see her. Pretending to notice her might make her shy, so I'll just act as if I don't see her, he reasoned with himself as he walked away. A great merit indeed, Van Brandt, Rita thought, watching him leave. Then it hit her. If I want to file a petition for Jacquard, I need to meet with him. With a sudden jolt of realization, she shot up from her seat and rushed after him. She quickened her pace through the hallway, closing the distance. Why does he walk so fast? She wondered, slightly breathless. Sir, she called out with a smile. Prince Brandt stopped, turning toward her. But before she could speak, both of them froze. A familiar figure was approaching. Proud Carter. I can't run into him right now. Rita panicked. Just as she was about to turn away, someone swiftly grabbed her by the arm, pulling her into the shadows of a nearby bookshelf. It was Blaine Shade. Sir Blaine? She whispered, realizing who had dragged her away. He held a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Rita clenched her jaw. Fine, but standing this close is incredibly inconvenient. Pressed against Blaine in the tight hiding spot, she felt his breath against her skin. Blaine smirked. Try saying kiss, he thought, watching her frown. Let me go, Rita whispered harshly. Amused, Blaine released her, putting some distance between them with a soft chuckle. What are they talking about? He muttered, turning his attention to Proud Carter and Prince Brandt. I'm just as curious as you, Rita admitted, peeking at them. Prince Brant remained stoic, but he carefully observed the man before him. That smile, he thought as he watched Proud Carter's expression. A bad one. The Emperor has passed away, Proud Carter said casually. I heard rumors that you two were together, but I only see you here alone. Prince Brant's expression remained unreadable. Don't look so intimidating, Proud Carter said with a faint smile. Anyway, there seems to be a misunderstanding between us. Prince Brant said nothing. Proud Carter's smile remained, but his tone turned serious. You're still young, and you're very intelligent. Grow alongside him, and in time, you'll understand. He studied Prince Brant for a moment before adding, because of this, I'll do my best to assist you. Brant's eyes darkened slightly. Thank you, he finally said, his tone cool. He turned his head away from Proud Carter's gaze. I hope you'll keep your promise. Then, without another word, he walked away. His face. Proud Carter observed the prince's retreating figure. From their hiding spot, Rita narrowed her eyes. Their relationship doesn't seem good, or am I mistaken? She mused. Blaine smirked, his gaze shifting toward her. Your eyes are not only beautiful, but they're also quite sharp. Then, for a brief moment, his eyes flickered downward. Blaine's face flushed red. Rita caught his gaze and immediately shoved him away. Blaine chuckled, rubbing his arm. I'm sorry, he said, still grinning. Men's eyes are naturally drawn to beautiful things. Rita, slightly flustered, crossed her arms. If you don't say it out loud, I won't have to kill you. Blaine only laughed harder, but Rita's mind was elsewhere. So Proud Carter and Great Merritt Van Brant aren't on the same page. Interesting. Her expression darkened slightly. If even a man with a good reputation like the Duke can be convinced, people like Proud Carter should be easy to eliminate. How should I approach him? She wondered, deep in thought. Blaine tilted his head, watching her closely. Lady Bertha, you seem to be thinking about something very interesting, he murmured. But don't forget, I'm still right beside you. His voice carried a hint of amusement. It was obvious. Prince Van Brant and Marquise Carter didn't get along at all. If that's true, what will you do? Rita asked, glancing at Blaine, curious about his thoughts. Blaine took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Hard to say, my lady. What would a mere royal treasury accountant like me know? He said playfully. Oh, don't be like that. Enlighten me, Rita pressed, placing a hand against Blaine's chest, subtly trying to maintain space between them. Blaine smirked. Who knows? Maybe we'll end up solving another difficult matter together, just like last time. Don't tell me you don't trust my skills? Rita teased, flashing a confident smile. Blaine's expression shifted slightly. I can see why fools would sell their souls just to worship the ground she walks on, he thought, tension creeping into his gaze. Come closer, he murmured, motioning for her to approach. Rita hesitated but complied. Suddenly, Blaine wrapped his arm around her waist, leaning in with his eyes half closed. Rita stood frozen. What on earth are you doing? She shouted, shoving him away. Blaine chuckled softly. Frankly speaking, I'm quite comfortable right now, my lady. Rita sighed, ignoring his antics. With those two beasts too busy clashing, the Shade family remains untouched. If you had to pick a side, who would it be? Blaine gave an easygoing smile. I'm a simple man, my lady. I have no interest in other men, but if I must choose... He took a step back and placed a hand over his chest. I choose to trust the judgment of a beautiful woman. You say that without knowing which side I'd take? Rita asked, raising an eyebrow. Blaine leaned in slightly. I am but a fool who cannot hope to understand the depths of my lady's delicate heart just yet. His fingers brushed lightly against Rita's ear. Though you may appear as fragile as a lamb, I see the lion within you, he whispered. His smirk returned. You don't waste your time on weak and uninteresting prey. No, the one who catches your eye must be a skilled and cunning beast indeed. Back at the Alberhart manor, Rita returned to her chambers. Jana assisted her in undressing, but Rita remained silent, lost in thought about her encounter with Blaine in the royal library. These clothes are musty. Throw them away, she instructed. Yes, miss, Jana replied, startled by her firm tone. Rita glanced toward the empty room. What about the guest I asked you to bring? Are they here? Jana nodded. Of course, miss. Well done. Rita's voice softened slightly. On your way out, call Ian for me. Yes, miss, Jana answered with a polite smile before exiting. Moments later, Ian appeared before Rita, his expression tense. Rita studied him, a small smirk forming. He looks pale. I suppose ignoring him worked. He's terrified. Usually the strategy is to pick them off one by one, starting with the weakest, but I did the opposite. She crossed her arms. What shall I do with you? Ian lowered his gaze. As you are aware, I recently attended court. There, I learned exactly what happens when a disobedient dog turns on its master. His tone was carefully measured. Rita remained silent, watching him intently. When did she change this much? Ian wondered. What happened to the girl who would cry and wallow in self-pity? Even with his sincerest apology, he knew there was little hope for forgiveness. My apologies, miss. He bowed deeply. I cannot begin to atone for my actions. Rita scoffed. Apology? She folded her arms, eyes narrowing. I don't follow. What value could your apology possibly have? Ian lowered his head further. Forgive me, miss, he pleaded. If you were truly sorry, you wouldn't have done something to be sorry for in the first place, Rita said coldly. Her mind drifted back to their first encounter, to how Ian had taken advantage of her. Thinking she was Verta, she clenched her jaw. It's not something I can simply ignore. If I were you, I'd feel embarrassed, she said, her voice laced with disdain. Ian flinched as she continued, her tone almost mocking. If I had married Jean Lawrence and been tossed between you and all the other men in this world, would you have still apologized? She smirked. I doubt it. Ian's stomach twisted. If he was thrown out of the Alberhart estate, his life would be over. Without a referral, he wouldn't be able to find work in another noble household. He would be nothing. A commoner. Lord Alberhart will be quite upset if he finds out, Ian muttered, desperate to salvage his position. What's that? Rita tilted her head, feigning confusion. I can't hear a word from a fired loser. Ian stiffened. Miss, please reconsider. Are you deaf? Rita snapped. I said you're fired. Miss! Ian cried out. Rita's eyes darkened. How dare you raise your voice at me? She strode toward him, gripping his shirt tightly. Ian's breath caught in his throat. Your only job was to ensure my engagement remained intact. She gazed into his eyes, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Oh dear, but... Her lips curled into a smile. My dear fiancé is nothing but a jar of ashes now. Ian's entire body stiffened. Rita's expression turned ice cold. If my relationship with the Lawrence family is over, then so is your usefulness. Do you really think you deserve my forgiveness? She scoffed. You dare try to intimidate me? By invoking my father's name, no less? With a sharp tug, she released him, stepping back. I wonder who they'd throw out faster? She mused. The only daughter of the Alberhart family, or a mere butler. She turned toward the door. Shall we put it to the test? Ian collapsed to the ground. Miss Alberhart, he stammered, his voice shaking. Rita paused, glancing over her shoulder. Ian's lips trembled. What I did was wrong. Please, I'm begging you. Then, to her surprise, he dropped to his knees, kissing the very ground beneath her feet. Rita's eyes widened slightly. I only did it because I loved you, Ian stuttered. How else could a mere butler like me express my feelings? It was the only way. Rita's expression darkened. In an instant, she pressed her foot against his chest, pushing him down onto his back. Ian gasped. You did it because you loved me? She repeated mockingly. It was the only way because of our difference in class? A chilling smile played on her lips. Are you even listening to yourself? Ian's breath hitched. Rita's voice dropped into a deadly whisper. If you truly loved me, you should have come to me the moment you saw what kind of man my fiancé was, Rita hisses. When he suggested making me his plaything, you should have spat in his face and refused such a disgusting proposal. Her expression darkens, making Ian shrink further in fear. Suitors from noble backgrounds flock to you. How could I refuse? Ian says, his voice calm but his expression uneasy. Rita doesn't hesitate. She strikes his chest, making him stagger. Enough of your excuses, she snaps. Ian clutches his chest, eyes wide. Miss, he stammers. Forgive my ignorance. Please allow me to stay by your side. He clasps his hands together in a plea. Rita watches him, unimpressed. You'd really do anything? Yes, of course, miss. I'll do anything. Ian insists desperately. Then I won't deny you the chance to prove your loyalty, she says, gripping his hair and pulling him closer. Please, just tell me what to do, miss. What shall I do first? Ian asks, his voice trembling with eagerness. Go collect your severance from Jana, then depart for Tadam immediately, Rita orders. Ian blinks in disbelief. Miss? Find out how my parents are faring and report back to me in full detail, she commands, still holding his hair. Rita had her reasons for this errand. She found Verta's parents too indifferent, superficial even. No matter how busy they were, their coldness toward their only daughter seemed unnatural. Rita suspected there might be a hidden secret. If I do this, you'll truly forgive me, miss? Ian asks, hope creeping into his voice. Yes, she replies, her tone less harsh. I'll write a letter. Make sure to deliver it to them. I swear to deliver it, miss, and I will return with news of the lord and mistress, Ian says, smiling. Rita, however, watches him sternly. Good. Now go, she says, finally releasing his hair. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, miss, Ian says as he reaches the door. I promise I won't fail you. He turns to leave, but a faint, unreadable smile lingers on his face. In Rita's room, Yersha stands dressed in a butler's uniform. Is this enough? Rita asks, holding up a strand of Ian's hair. Yes, a single hair is all I need to cast a spell, Yersha confirms. Rita smirks. I'd be a fool to send a dog who tried to bite his master away without a leash. A small safeguard only makes sense. Shortly, Ian will start experiencing rashes, then a cough, then fever, Yersha explains. All symptoms of a desert disease. His condition will improve as he nears Tadam, but if he strays elsewhere, the illness will turn deadly. Holding the strand of hair between her fingers, Yersha mutters an incantation. A faint glow pulses around it before vanishing. That's well and good, Rita muses, but now that you've become Lady Verta's butler, your name might draw unwanted attention. Yersha nods. It would be a shame if we went through all the trouble of getting me here only for my name to give us away. Then take an alias, Rita suggests. Yen? It's not too different from my real name, Yersha says. Rita thinks for a moment before smiling. Very well, Yen. From now on, I'm counting on you. 2 weeks later, at the hospital run by Prince Brandt sits at his desk, going through a stack of documents. He sighs, resting his head against the back of his chair when movement outside catches his eye. Curious, he stands and walks over to the window. Outside, Rita is gardening, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Lady Verta? He murmurs. Now that he thinks about it, Hans, the groundskeeper, mentioned it this morning. She's been volunteering for the past 2 weeks, Hans had informed him. Despite being a noblewoman, she pulls weeds, washes hospital bed sheets, scrubs floors, even plays with the youngest patients in the ward. Prince Brandt had barely paid attention then, but now, seeing her work firsthand, he's caught off guard. She's really doing all that? He wonders. I had no idea she was so earnest. Rita, sensing his gaze, smirks inwardly. Finally, he's watching. For 2 weeks, she'd been laboring at this godforsaken hospital just for a chance to meet that stingy prince. Time for action. Dusting herself off, she takes a step, then suddenly collapses to the ground. Lady Verta! Prince Brandt shouts, rushing outside. Lying motionless, Rita thinks to herself, he saw that, right? There's no way he didn't. I even made sure to wear this bright yellow dress. If Prince Brandt doesn't come, she reasons, Hans certainly will. And if neither of them does, she'll be very annoyed, especially after all the bribes she handed out. Lady Verta! Prince Brandt calls again, kneeling beside her. Hurry up and pick me up, you fool, she thinks, feeling his presence close by. He reaches out but suddenly stops. Instead of touching her directly, he removes his jacket and carefully wraps it around her before lifting her into his arms. Geez. What's with this unrelenting chivalry? Rita thinks, still feigning unconsciousness. Prince Brandt carries her inside. The heat must have gotten to her while pulling weeds. She should rest in one of the hospital beds. As he climbs the stairs, he glances down at her, his eyes lingering on her features. This is my first time being so close to a woman. Meanwhile, Rita, still pretending to be unconscious, peeks through her lashes. Anytime I see a goody two-shoes, I can't help but want to play around a little. A mischievous thought crosses her mind. Shall I tease him? She shifts slightly, pressing herself against him. She murmurs softly, pretending to stir. Prince Brandt looks away, watching as Rita appears to fall asleep in his arms. Softly, she opens her eyes. Lady Verta, can you hear me? He calls out gently. Ah, Prince Van Brandt, she murmurs weakly before pretending to faint again. He looks flustered. Please, get a hold of yourself, he urges, concern etched on his face. He's just itching to put me down, isn't he? Rita thinks, still playing along. Did I faint? she asks softly. My apologies. If you could, please let me down. Prince Brant carefully places her on her feet. Rita sways slightly as if struggling to regain her balance, then suddenly stumbles forward. Startled, Prince Brant instinctively reaches out to catch her, but she presses her chest firmly against his arm, making him freeze. It's just acting. What a dummy, Rita thinks, suppressing a grin. Kya! She suddenly yelps, dramatically pushing him away. Prince Brant stares, startled. How can he treat a sick girl this way? Doesn't he feel any shame? Rita thinks, putting on a distressed expression. Prince Brant quickly averts his gaze, his face red. Forgive me, I must attend to something urgent. Very urgent, he stammers before turning away in a quick dash. Rita watches him go, completely baffled. What's with him? He's a grown man, isn't he? Then a realization dawns on her, and she flinches in shock. It couldn't be... Is he a virgin? Her irritation flares. I didn't even get a chance to bring up Marquise Carter! At his office, Prince Brant is back to writing when a knock sounds at the door. Hans enters, leading Rita inside. Lady Verta? Prince Brant says, visibly surprised by her visit. Hello, Your Highness? Rita greets with a polite bow. She smiles inwardly. Good. This visit doesn't seem forced at all. Now seated across from each other, Prince Brant offers her a cup of coffee. I must apologize for yesterday, Rita begins, gracefully lifting her cup. I came here to help others, yet instead, I became a burden. I should have been more careful. Her voice is soft, her demeanor composed. Of course, you must have been angry with me. Not at all, Prince Brant replies quickly. Rather, please forgive my lack of attentiveness. Are you feeling better? Yes, Rita responds, brushing her fingers against her lips in a thoughtful manner. The sunlight was quite strong yesterday. It must have made me faint. Prince Brant watches her closely. Would you like to be examined by one of our doctors? A specialist from the north is here. I shall summon him immediately. Rita's fingers tighten slightly around her cup. A specialist from the north? That means their skill level is far superior to Oslin's incompetent physicians. She lets out a small, polite smile. No, thank you. I'm truly fine. Setting her cup down, she changes the subject. More importantly, I happened to see Your Highness at the Royal Library the other day. Prince Brant is momentarily caught off guard. The library? He repeats. Yes, Rita continues, taking a casual sip of her tea. On my way out, I saw you. I was going to greet you, but you seemed to be in the middle of a quarrel with your companion. Prince Brant's expression hardens slightly as he recalls the conversation with Marquise Carter. The administrative and judicial branches are separate institutions, he explains. Differences of opinion occasionally arise, but it's nothing of concern. Marquise Carter and I hold no ill will toward each other. Really? Is that so? Rita muses, setting down her teacup. Personally, she tilts her head slightly, I do quite a lot, I might add. Prince Brant furrows his brows. Pardon? Why do you think I testified against my fiancée, Jean Lawrence? Prince Brant stiffens at her words. In his mind, he recalls the day of the trial, her composed yet piercing smile as she stood before the court. I hated him, Rita says, her voice trembling as her fingers curl into fists. And it wasn't just because he beat me. Prince Brant watches her carefully. Was there perhaps another reason? Rita exhales sharply. I believe my fiancé, Jean Lawrence, was secretly producing opiates. He intended to make me his accomplice. Opiates? Prince Brant repeats, his eyes narrowing. Rita nods. To him, I was a means to bring Count Alberhart into his operation, as well as a scapegoat if things went wrong. Reaching into her pocket, she carefully pulls out a small dried plant and places it on the table. This is the plant I found in Jean's room and secretly took out, she says. It's called Papaver somniferum. Prince Brant's eyes widen slightly. I am well aware that producing or distributing opiates is a felony in Osland, Rita continues. My father likely had no idea, otherwise he never would have agreed to the engagement. She takes a deep breath, then lifts her gaze to meet Prince Brant's directly. Unless they are fools, I doubt they're distributing the opiates domestically. Selling abroad would be safer and much harder to trace. She leans forward slightly. That's why my family's trading rights were valuable to them. And if anything went wrong, they would have pinned the blame on us. A dark glint flashes in her eyes. Jean Lawrence plotted to use and destroy my family. That should be more than enough to convince you. Right? Prince Brant remains silent, studying her closely. Rita straightens. But I don't believe Jean acted alone, she says firmly. She clenches her fists again, then slams her hand down onto the table. Behind Jean stood Marquis Carter. The room falls into heavy silence. Prince Brant watches her, his expression unreadable. Jean Lawrence may be dead, but Marquise Carter certainly won't let my family go without a fight, Rita says calmly. She looks at Prince Brant. My father is often occupied with foreign trade, unaware of what happens here at home. As the only daughter and heir of the Alberhart family, it's my responsibility to protect my family from this imminent danger. But as your grace is well aware, I'm simply a noblewoman. Her fingers hover over the poppy plant. Despite my shame, I came to ask for your help, she admits. Prince Brant listens intently before picking up the plant from the table. He studies it carefully. Thank you for informing me, he finally says. I will carefully consider what you've told me. I shall also investigate this plant further. A few days later, a guest arrives at the Alberhart Manor. Welcome, Prince Brant, Rita greets him with a smile. Lady Verta, he acknowledges her, his expression unreadable. His clenched fist betrays his unease. I thought it best to speak with you face to face, he says firmly. Once seated, Prince Brant lowers his gaze to the floor, a solemn look on his face. This can't be good, Rita thinks. Breaking the silence, he speaks. After further investigation, I've found this matter to be far more dangerous than even you might have guessed, my lady. His tone is serious. I'm afraid I have no choice. I cannot involve a noblewoman such as yourself in this case. It's too dangerous. Rita's eyes widen slightly in disappointment. So he expects me to just sit and wait? Don't make me laugh. I see, she says coolly. So the cutting I gave you wasn't of much help? Her hand rests lightly against her chest. She sighs. I should have known that alone wouldn't be enough to condemn Marquis Carter. His right-hand man, Jean, is dead. If he feigns ignorance, there's no way to pin anything on him. You misunderstand me, Prince Brant interjects. I respect your discernment and insight, but this matter is too dangerous for you. His voice is firm, carrying a warning. Rita watches him closely. I see. I understand your decision. She meets his gaze with an unreadable expression. I have not yet proven my skills to you, so how could I expect you to trust me? You misunderstand the issue, Lady Verta. Prince Brant replies, his jaw tightening. It is because you are capable that this is dangerous. This is for your own protection. Protection? Rita thinks, unimpressed. You think you can protect me? She keeps her expression composed. I respect your decision, Your Highness. However, if I cannot be directly involved, may I at least request an exchange of information? Her words make him pause. He looks at her intently. After all, Your Highness is an honest man who abides by truth and honor, she adds. Prince Brant falls silent as he recalls his recent meeting with a doctor. If the plant is consumed regularly, one may develop an intense addiction, the doctor had explained. Over time, the lungs deteriorate, leading to pneumonia-like symptoms. Prince Brant had been shocked. Are you certain? Yes, Your Grace, the doctor had confirmed. Furthermore, if one suddenly stops taking it, they could experience shock severe enough to cause death. Prince Brant's voice had lowered. The king had been strong enough to go fox hunting twice a week. Pneumonia alone wouldn't have been enough to kill him. Back in the present, Rita speaks firmly. I leaped into this with the resolve to protect my family. If Your Grace wishes for me to step back, you should at least give me a convincing reason to do so. She meets his gaze unwaveringly. Wouldn't you agree that's only fair? Prince Brant pauses before finally speaking. The Emperor was in good health before he died, he reveals. After his passing, every maid responsible for his meals either died suddenly or went missing. Rita's breath catches. It couldn't be. After his death, I suspected Marquis Carter, Prince Brant continues, his arms resting on his lap, but for over a year, I failed to find any evidence. He exhales. However, new evidence has come to light. Rita's eyes sharpen. Could it be the cutting I gave you? Yes, he confirms. Rita clenches her fists. Poisoning the king? Proud Carter, you're worse than I thought. Prince Brant continues. Moreover, after losing his right-hand man, Jean Lawrence, Marquis Carter has begun searching for a new associate. Rita narrows her eyes. Who might it be? Baron Nathan Hector is the most likely candidate. Rita frowns. Nay frowns slightly. I don't recognize that name. She thinks for a moment. I haven't lived in the aristocratic world for over a decade. If I don't recall him, he must come from an insignificant family. Prince Brant gives her another piece of information. Marquise Carter had an older sister. 10 years ago, she lost their family rivalry and ultimately married Marquise Amber. I see, Rita muses. But what connection does she have to Baron Hector? Marquise Amber has 2 daughters, one by Marcus Carter's sister and another by his ex-wife. The latter is Rosalie Amber. Prince Brant glances at Rita. She and you are of similar age. Rita listens closely. The daughter received a marriage proposal from Baron Hector. Am I correct? Prince Brant nods. Many believe he was lucky to win Rosalie Amber's favor, but he is considered unworthy of her. Rita contemplates this. If he marries into the Amber family, he could rise in rank and end up as a Marquise himself. Nathan Hector, Marquise Carter's next right-hand man. I'll have to remember him. She smirks slightly. Then one would have to get close to Rosalie Amber in order to approach her fiancé. That's right, Prince Brant confirms. Thank you, Prince Brant, Rita says with a polite smile. Inside, she thinks coldly. You say this is too dangerous for me? Just wait and see. Watch exactly how far I go. Not long after, Rita has tea at the Shade family manor with Blaine and Julie Shade. Rosalie Amber? Rita asks curiously. I met her once, Julie replies, shifting uncomfortably. How should I put this? Just your average noblewoman. Julie hesitates before adding, she was kind, but it felt like she was trapped by the expectations of others. Rita watches her, reading between the lines. She didn't seem interested in trying new things, Julie continues absently. Blaine suddenly interjects with a beaming smile. Lady Verta, may I ask why the sudden interest in the Amber family's daughter? Rita smiles back. Well, I heard she's an incredibly kind lady. I was hoping we could become friends. Julie nearly spits out her tea. What? Rosalie Amber. Kind. She slams her teacup down. That girl's got a full-blown savior complex. Forget friends. She's too busy giving away her liver and gallbladder to low-life commoners. Rita listens carefully. Seeing how worked up Julie is, Rosalie must truly be kind. I heard she recently got engaged, Blaine adds casually. His background is humble, but there are rumors he's extremely handsome. Rita chuckles inwardly. Blaine Shade? What a sharp man. She sips her tea, her mind already planning her next move. As soon as Rita brings up Rosalie Amber, Blaine smiles knowingly. Such a quick-witted man. He saw right through me immediately, she thinks. I can only imagine how many women have been enchanted by that face. Julie, however, slams the table. So what if he's handsome? He's from a modest household. He's probably just another scoundrel using his looks to mooch off his fiancée. Blaine smirks. You shouldn't judge so quickly, Julie. After all, didn't you once fall for Proud Carter? Though, of course, it was one-sided. Rita watches in shock. Julie fancied Proud Carter? Julie turns red, jumping from her seat. Brother, I was just a child back then. I know better now, she snaps before storming off. Blaine chuckles. My dear sister is off to sulk. Then, turning to Rita, he suggests a walk in the garden before she leaves. As they stroll, Blaine brings up Rita's parents. They've been abroad longer than expected. They're in Tatham, correct? Yes, Rita says, her voice quieter. It's been 2 years. They're negotiating trade, but it's taking far too long. Blaine studies her expression. She's already taken care of something, he deduces. Sensing the shift in mood, he changes the subject. Look, migrating birds pass through here before heading to Tatham in autumn, he says, pointing to the sky. Rita squints. I can't see. Blaine suddenly kicks the back of her heel, making her stumble. She falls backward onto him, landing on his leg. Oh my, how clumsy of me, she says, meeting his gaze. He winces. Luckily, nothing seems broken. Rita observes him closely, hesitating. You're quite handsome. Blaine grins. Don't tell me you only just realized this? His gaze flickers downward, and Rita picks up on it. Drat, at this rate, he thinks, trying to compose himself. If you don't mind, my lady, unless you plan on rewarding this unfortunate chap with a kiss, he teases. Rita frowns, then reconsiders. No one is around. She gently places her hands on his shoulders and leans in. Their lips meet in a slow, lingering kiss. Blaine stiffens slightly before responding, letting out a low sound of approval. This will be dangerous if we continue, he thinks, abruptly pulling away. If you keep thanking me like this, I wouldn't mind even if you used me as a sofa, he jokes, his face red. Rita smirks. After dealing with nothing but handsy idiots, this is a nice change of pace. She rises gracefully. No need to escort me out. Thank you for today. She leaves with a satisfied smile. Love is fine and all, but only being with one person sounds boring. This much is enough for me. Rita's carriage arrives at a building. Her gaze remains fixed outside. We've arrived, miss. Shall I open the door? The coachman asks. She startles slightly. How can someone have such an absolute lack of presence? Is he even human? Stepping out, she studies the man. Even though I've seen him 100 times, if he turned around, I wouldn't recognize a single one of his features. Suddenly, an idea strikes her. She smiles. John, it must be dreadfully boring just standing here while I volunteer, she muses. Pardon? It is my duty, miss. It isn't boring at all, John replies stiffly. She narrows her eyes. John hesitates. Yes, you are correct, miss. It's very boring. She nods approvingly. While you're waiting, keep an eye and ear out for any suspicious figures. Understood? John bows. Of course, miss. Rita offers a faint smile. Enjoy yourself, she says before walking into the building.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Manhwa content. See you in the next one.